Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunshine Coast Regional District Special Board Meeting of Monday, August 16th, 2021. I'd like to call us to order at 9:31 here this morning and acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District operates on the traditional territories of the Seashell and the Squamish First Nations, and we're very grateful to be here. We have an agenda in front of us today, and before we move to adopt this agenda, I would like to move number 6, our local water status update, up to the top of our reports. If we could just change the order slightly there, because I know it's of intense interest across the coast. So with that, before we move to adopt the agenda as amended, are there any other changes or additions that need to be done at this time? Looking to staff and to directors, if there's anything else you'd like to change at this time. Seeing none, I will ask for a motion to adopt the agenda as amended, please. So moved, Director Beamish, seconded, Director Ties. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Being that this is a special meeting, we do not have any minutes, so we do not have any business arising from minutes or unfinished business. No presentations or delegations as of today. So we will go right into the local water status update, and this is our GM of Infrastructure Services, Mr. Remco Rosenboom. GM Rosenboom, over to you, please.
Thank you. I have to figure out how this works in the boardroom. I'm going to share my screen as well. Let's see where to go. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to provide an update today on the water supply situation in most of the water systems. I will touch on the ones of concern at this point in time. Let's see. So the current situation is we still have not received a lot of rain in our systems since mid-June. It's raining beanie at this point in time in some spots on the coast, but not any significance in terms of our water supply situation on the coast. Last week we had again a heat wave. And the water lake, the Chapman Lake water levels have dropped significantly in the last several weeks, which triggered the declaration of stage 4 as of Tuesday last week. So what is this picture? I think was in the media as well. It was taken last week Wednesday. Since last Wednesday, the lake levels dropped further, and the channel is now almost dry. So we're currently having our Edwards Lake valve open as well since last week, Wednesday, to augment the supply to the creek. And staff were hoping to get up there today to activate the siphons, but due to the cloud cover, we're not able to do so. So we'll try again tomorrow morning. But in the meantime, there's no risk to the water supply because we're just releasing additional water from Edwards today to augment to make sure that we meet our demands. So what does the forecasting look like? The picture on the left is the 3 months forecast for Canada, Environment Canada and Climate Change for as issued on June 30. The one on the right is from July 31. And you can see that there's still a significant risk in our area for drier than normal next couple of months. So we're definitely not out of the woods yet. South Pender system. This is Mcneil Lake as of early this morning. You can see that the water levels dropped significantly. We're currently down about 20.5 centimeters. The max we've ever drawn it down was 40. Mcneil Lake, we can supplement if we need to with water from Harrison Lake. that is an higher elevation lake that we have structure on, that we can release some water to Mcneil Lake. It's not a significant amount, but it will definitely help. What you will see here, there's water on the right side of the picture. When the water level drops more significantly, there will be kind of natural dam formed, so the water on the right will stay there, and we won't be able to divert it. So that's Mcneil Lake as of this morning. This is the precipitation so far at Seashell Airport to date. So you can see in January we were at climate normals, but since we've had less rain than in last 10 years, the average of the last 10 years, and I think the rain we're having today does not really make August a normal year. Really, look at July. It really was one of the driest months, I think, on record here on the coast. So, in terms of the temperatures, these are the number of days that we were above the normal temperatures. And you can see that 2021 is already at the top of the list from the last 4 years, and it's only getting more because these are only the data until today. How is the water use by the community doing? This is the graph from earlier this year, April 1st, and what you can see is that during stage 2, but primarily at stage 3, there became a decoupling between temperature and demand, which was a good thing to see. During stage 2, it still varies with temperature, and during stage 3, it was not. And that's what we were hoping to see. And the drop just before the declaration of stage 3, the red bar, is the little rain event, the small rain event we had early August. And you can see that demand is going up again. Temperature were going up again since, but the demand went down, which is a good thing. So it's currently hovering about 13.5 million cubes, 13,500 cubes a day. This is the residential water use in only the electro areas, because that's where we have the meters installed at the moment. And what you can see is that the gray bar, the gray lines are the 2020 data, and the blue ones is the 2021 data. And you can really see that where last year it plateaued at about 900 liters a day average per household, this year it went up to almost 14, which is a significant increase. And this is what's really, this is what part of this is resulting in the increased drawdown from Chapman Lake. If you present it by area, you can see that North Pender is up there, South Pender is next, and the systems with water restrictions in place, area D and E, are below that. They are plateaued a little bit, but still in increase from June. And interesting increase in Egmont and Earls Cove that I have not further analyzed yet. But you can see that there is a differentiation here between the systems with and without escalated water regulations, North-South Pender versus area B and D in E. So we did an analysis of what is the water use by stage for the last several years, just to see how we are comparing. And the winter data, you can see that they are, the winter demand, you can see that has been reduced over the last several years, and that's primarily due to resolution of leaks, which is great. And you can see that in stage 2 and 3, the demand in the use by the community in stage 2 and 3 were higher than in any of the previous years. And stage 4 so far, the average, as indicated, is 13.5, which is also higher than we've previously seen. Part of the reason for that, especially during stage 4, is the fact that stage 4 is implemented early in August. And while, for example, in 2019, it was late August. So this could be an effect this could be caused by more seasonal residents and tourists being on the coast during the summer months versus if, let's say, in 2018, when it was called late August, August 31st. So I tried to summarize at a really high level what the community response is to the calling of stage 4 in the Chapman system. And this is based on all kind of feedback we received through social media, phone calls, emails, etc. There's in general an acceptance of the urgency of the situation given the unprecedented dry spring and summer and warm weather. I think that's what we're seeing. But there are also a lot of questions about what is the status of our water supply expansion projects and why does it take so long for them to get developed, constructed, permitted, etc. There's a significant feedback from farmers requesting exemptions. This was last an exemption at stage 4. This was last considered in 2018. At that point, the board decided to not grant that exemption. But in 2015, it was granted. There's currently a water delivery service initiative from private well sources being developed by the farming community in collaboration with two commercial entities. And the SRD is establishing a bulk water supply station somewhere in the Langdale system for farmers and others to fill up large tanks. More information about that to come in upcoming days. And that will include information on how to make an appointment to get your tank filled up. And the reason why we can do it from the Langdale system is because we have access capacity there, as well as in the system, as well as in our pump station. So it's more a question there of how can we staff it, because our staffing resources are quite thin at the moment. There's also a lot of questions we're receiving about why are the current water conservation regulations, hence bylaw 422, is it only limited to outdoor use? Why is it not regulating other commercial users like breweries, cideries, cement factories, etc., etc.? And that's currently how the regulation is established, and we will need to dive into it further to actually see what the options are within the context of bylaw 42 to regulate those kind of users. South Pender Harbor system, water system. Our water treatment plant has been able to meet demand. However, maintaining sufficient fire flow in some areas has been challenging at some days. And it was a result of that demand in those areas were so high that the reservoir levels were dropping at a higher speed than we were able to replenish them. As a result, it was challenged to make sure that there was enough water in those reservoirs in case there was a big fire in the area. But we've been able to manage that. However, there's a second part to it. Last week, while looking at the water lake levels and doing some analysis on that, we confirmed that our permitted daily use is just over 1,800 cubes a day. That's according to our water licenses we have for that system. And we've confirmed that this year there has been a multitude of days that we have operated above that threshold. In June, it was 2 days, and in July, it was about 15 days. So half of July, we operated above what we're actually authorized to operate at from our licensing perspective. And as you can see in the numbers, it's about 200 cubes a day that we were over. We still have to do some further data analysis for prior years to see if this was actually also the case in more recent years. So what we have to do is do the data analysis for this year and prior years and report all those compliances to the province and have further conversations with them about next steps. In the meantime, we definitely improved our internal checks and balances to make sure that our water license maximum allowance is not exceeded anymore. However, to make sure that for the rest of this year, we're not exceeding it anymore because we're now aware of it, stage 2 will be in effect for that system as of this Friday. A news release about that will be issued later today. So, just a quick overview of all the systems. Egmont, Cove K, North Pender, still stage 1. Stage 2 will be in effect as of this Friday for South Pender systems. Grantham, Soames, and Langdale are still on stage 2. Stage 3, none of the systems are at stage 3, and Chapman and Eastbourne are currently at stage 4. And just to clarify, stage 4 at Eastbourne means that there is what we call zone filling. So the water system is divided into zones, and depending on the amount of water in the wells, the water tanks in the specific zone will be filled up, and only then it will be moved to the next zone. And the residents will have to adjust their demand based on how much water they have in their tanks. So, leak notifications, the leak resolution process, of course, that's still ongoing. In June, we sent out about 190 letters, and about half of those leaks have been resolved as of at the end of the month. So that is a good result. But that work is still ongoing, and leaks are being resolved on a daily basis. I thought it was worth to mention that staff contacted 4 residents in the Seashell area, where there were visible indication that they might have a leak, and was indeed correct. And those 4 residents alone resulted in a saving of 345,000 liters a day. So huge leaks were present there. So we're really happy to get those resolved. We also sent leak notification letters to commercial users in July, 45 of them. And more residential notifications will be sent in September. And to date, about 250 people have subscribed to our monthly water use update program. In terms of outreach and enforcement, to date, 66 warnings issued and 4 fines, some in stage 1 in stage 1 and others in stage 2 and 3. We currently have 2 dedicated staff to follow up on all complaints we receive and to do patrols during all days of the week. In addition, we responded to hundreds of inquiries, primarily phone, but sometimes also email. And as indicated, non-compliances can result in bylaw enforcement notices and fines. And given for the water systems that are currently on stage 4, our tolerance is way less than it was in stage 3 and stage 2 for any non-compliance. So what is in store for us this summer and the fall? Based on the weather forecast, there's still no rain and ongoing warm weather forecasted for the upcoming weeks. So all water conservation regulations will remain in place until we receive that good amount of significant rainfall, and especially for the Chapman system that requires several days of 25 millimeters of rain. That's what we need to really recharge that system. So for the Chapman system, as well as for Eastbourne system, any further reduction of the use by the community will reduce our risk for supply not meeting demand. So for us running out of water. And for both systems, when I say running out of water, I really mean that you can open the tap, but there is not the more water in the pressure coming out of it as you used to, or no water at all. And especially in this case, for these two systems, especially for the Chapman system, there is a huge risk there from a health perspective, from a drinking water supply perspective, but also from a firefighting perspective. We need to keep our reservoirs full so that our firefighters can rely on that water source in all cases if there's a fire in the area. So what we're doing, we started to prepare for emergency response if we actually would run out of water. For our Chapman system, I don't expect it to happen to mid to late September, and that the timing of that really depends on the demand from the community, the amount of rain we might get between now and then, as well as, and this sounds a little bit weird, the amount of dew we get higher up in the system. And that can be significant, but the soil is currently so bone dry up there that most likely any of the dew will just be absorbed by the ground and won't really have an impact to the water system at the moment. But usually it does in September, but let's see. For Eastbourne, it's guessing how long that's, the wells are still holding up, but we're really looking forward there to the day that there will be less residents on Eastbourne after the September long weekend, because then the demand will drop, and we hope that by that time we can have a better estimate of how long the wells can actually continue to do the zone filling. 10 minutes ago, I prepared the slide, so it's not, or 15 minutes ago, it's not too comprehensive, but what we are doing in terms of our emergency responses for Eastbourne, the emergency response would be that we would barge water from our Langdale system to Eastbourne, to the Eastbourne dock, and feed it into the community there, into the community system there. We have the tanks. We purchased the tanks 2 years ago, and we have them at hand for this particular purpose. And we're working with Vancouver Coastal Health to make sure that the use of the tanks is approved by them as well. For the Chapman system, it will be really, in terms of reducing the demand at Eastbourne, I don't think there's a lot to do other than just less people on the island. But that's their use is already so minimal that there's not a lot to gain there. From the Chapman system, I think it's really a two-pronged approach: increasing supply and reducing demand. Increasing supply, what we're doing is we're seeing what is the technical feasibility to get more water out of Edwards and Chapman Lake if our current infrastructure is not able to do it anymore. In Edwards, in the case of Edwards, it's if the water levels are dropping below the valve outlet, and Chapman Lake if the water levels are, if the siphons are not siphoning anymore. So we're working on what is the technical feasibility of any further drawdown of those lakes. But the work that will need to take place there is the regulatory feasibility of any of those options. Especially, both options will require collaboration and permits from BC Parks as well as Flindward. And given that they're in the park, and there will be some interesting discussions to have in upcoming weeks, but we will initiate them. Trout Lake used to be an intake. We still have the infrastructure, most of the infrastructure there to use that lake as well. Some modifications required, but that can be activated if required. However, the actual benefit is limited. Our license volume is about 0.2 million liters a day. It will help, but not significantly. Earlier this year, we did a test with the town of Gibsons to see if it would be possible for the town of Gibsons to supply water to our Zone 3. And at that time, it was confirmed that we could. And I can see that as a measure that we can further explore for in case we get to the stage that our current infrastructure is not sufficient anymore. And I put some dotted line there because there might be a good chance that in upcoming days we come up with some other alternative solutions we can deploy. And given the timeline, we have a month about to implement or to plan and prepare for any of these measures. So any of these measures should be really implementable within the time frame. What we're also doing is we're going to look at what are other regular tools we have and have not deployed yet to further reduce the demand by putting in targeted restrictions. And I'm thinking, for example, commercial use, indoor use. What are the regulatory tools we have? What are the decisions to be made by who for us to actually to do that? And this is all to make sure that we have the water that we need from a health and firefighter perspective. And this is it. More than happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, GM Rosenboom. I say terrific even though it's not terrific news, but it's good to have it there and see what we have. So before I go to questions from the directors, I do have a few myself, so I'm going to start with that. So just to clarify, because we do have some rain today, however, it is just a drizzle. And can you just repeat what kind of rain event we would need in order to recharge the system, please?
Thank you for the question. For the Chapman system, we would need multiple days of 25 millimeters a day.
Okay. And the last rain event that we had earlier was 6 millimeters in the system, and we don't have any estimates yet, of course, on what's going on now because it's still currently raining a little bit.
Yeah, and I have not been able to confirm this morning yet if it's actually raining at Chapman Lake itself.
Okay.
Because sometimes it's raining here, not up there, and vice versa. So to be determined, but I don't expect it to rain heavily up there at the moment.
Okay. Thank you. So, and then one of the slides you said that our current usage is 13,500, approximately 13,500 cubes per day. What is our goal during stage 4?
In the past, we've been able, let's put it that way. If there's no outdoor use at all, and there would be the same amount of residents on the coast as if there would be in the winter month, the demand during stage 4 should more or less be equal to the winter demand. The winter demand last year was about 10,000 cubic meters a day, and we're currently at 13.5. However, I realized that there are tourists on the coast and there are seasonal residents on the coast that are not there during the normal winter months. So from that perspective, I can understand that we will never reach the 10,000, but I definitely would hope that we can get closer to the 12 than we are currently.
Okay. So to reiterate, our goal is hopefully around the 12,000 cubic meters or cubes per day. And that's what we're looking at. And we're currently at 13.5.
Yeah.
Okay. I am going to go, I do have other questions, but I see that there is a lineup of directors here. So I'm going to start with Director Ties and then over to Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I have I'm wondering what's going on with Gray Creek. Have we activated it? Are the creek levels too low? Yeah, what's the status there on Gray Creek?
Thank you for the question. I should have mentioned our Chester Well and Creek Creek, both water supply sources, are currently running at capacity.
Okay. Over to Director Toth and then Director McMahon.
Thank you, Chair. I have a raft of questions, but I'll ask a couple and then turn it over to the next speaker. I'm wondering, where are we at with our supply increase projects? Obviously everybody wants to know Church Road. I have seen on social media that staff are now saying end of 2022 instead of summer 2022. So that's one project that I know people are going to be eager to hear an update on. The other thing I'm wondering, having seen your slide that mentions 4 properties in the Seashell area using 340 or leaking 345,000 liters a day, is there anything that we can do to speed up the installation of meters in Seashell for leak detection? Obviously, that's not going to help us this year, but yeah, and I'll leave it there for the moment.
Let's start. Thank you for the questions. I will start with the later one. Meter installations. To be honest, I think all our current staff efforts are focused on the current day situations, and we're not only because of just summer season. The moment we activate our siphons, staff have to hike in or fly in every day to the lake to check on the infrastructure and do some monitoring for from a permitting perspective. And on a day like today, when there's cloud cover or when the helicopters are in use for firefighting purposes, we have to hike in, and that would mean a team of 3 people. So our current staffing resources are all focused on addressing the current issues, and I don't see how we can expedite our work on the water metering installations in the Seashell area as much as I would like to. However, if residents are concerned that they, in the Seashell area, that they might have a leak or that they see water somewhere where they don't expect it to be, or they see wet areas, for example, green part of the grass field where it's unlikely that that there is a spring underneath. Report it to us, and we can take a look at it, because we can usually identify if any water that somewhere is treated, is chlorinated or not, and that way we can identify if there's at least, is it groundwater or is it water from the distribution system. See a follow-up question there?
I just wanted to acknowledge that that work that staff have been doing. I know that there's an area near Browning Road that has been of concern, and staff have been amazing in following that up. So thank you for those answers.
Yeah. Now I did forgot your first question. Sorry.
Supply. Where are we at with Church Road and other supply initiatives?
So 2.5 weeks ago, we met with the province and Squamish Nation to discuss the project. And currently, the Squamish Nation is reviewing some additional material they were supplied with by the province. And I'm following up with them later this week to see where they're at in terms of any questions they have with respect to that supply. And I'm going to give this, them. Both the province and Squamish Nation are aware of our water supply situation as it is right now here. And yeah, that's where it is right now. And for Langdale and the Langdale Well Development Program, RFP has been out or is posted currently. I have to see when it's closing. So it's being tendered at the moment. So we hope to get a contractor for that one in place shortly as well.
And then any comments on the slipping of the Church Road timeline to the end of 2022 instead of summer 2022?
I'm still hopeful that we can meet the summer 22 deadline. It might not be June 1st, but even August 1st, I would be really happy with it. So we'll put every measure in place we can the moment we have the permit in hand to actually work with or to incentivize our contractors to provide us with an expedited schedule.
Okay, next up on our list, I have Director McMahon and then Director Beamish.
Thank you. I also have a raft of questions. I'll just preface this by saying I was down in Shasta Creek Ravine on Saturday morning, and the creek is lower than anyone has ever seen it before. In places, it actually disappears underneath the gravel. A lot of the fish ponds that normally stay wet all summer are dried up, and so the situation is pretty dire. And the other part, I think, of the message to the public is to be very careful about fire, because we really, really don't want to have a fire. So we appreciate people's vigilance that way. Although I have a lot of questions, I'm just going to go forward to September the 2nd, which is our next scheduled meeting. So will we be getting a full water report at that time with emergency measures in it? And given that we may have to take emergency measures, should we not schedule a board meeting for the same day?
Thank you for the question. I'll work with other SLT members to see if we can, at the Planning and Community Development meeting, if there's an opportunity there to provide a water supply update, because I agree it might be beneficial. In terms of board meetings, it's to be seen if at that time any board decisions are required in terms of our emergency to deploy any of the emergency measures. If so, we'll definitely see what the best timing is of such decisions, or if they can wait until the September 8th board meeting.
Okay, thank you. Over to Director Beamish and then Director Hiltz.
Yes, thank you. I had already scheduled a meeting at 1 o'clock today with my staff to talk about the water situation in Gibson. So I have, if you want to talk to them in advance of that, I think we need to anticipate and be proactive in terms of what we want. You could even join us in that meeting if you like. Mark is going to be there, and hopefully Dave. Because I think that we have to take a look ourselves at whether or not, if we were going to supply water to the regional district on an emergency basis, if we shouldn't automatically go to stage 3 ourselves on that. Right now, we're at stage 2. So we need to do some thinking as to what that would mean for us and the timing of that. And so I appreciate those conversations early, and not an emergency on an emergency. Okay. Your comments on leak detection and what to look for. I'm not sure if that's on the website, but I think it's very useful if people know what they should be looking for either on their property. I recently left my house, walked my dog in the morning, and noticed water running in the ditch. And I was able to trace it back to a neighbor's house who is an absentee neighbor, and walked up their driveway and heard water running. So I knew it was in the house, not prior to the house, and called them and went in and shut their water off. And but that probably started overnight, but the volume of water, because it had gone out there as kind of a full pipe running, continued to run in the ditch for 2 days as that water migrated from the property into the ditch. And so people just need to know what to look for. And they should have, if they have an absentee landlord next door to them, owner next door to them, have a phone number to contact them. Because interestingly enough, we had just received that phone number the week before from our neighbor, and I was able to call them. They were able to tell me where to find a key. I was able to go in the house, shut the water off, and they came over and did the repair. So, but having that, what to look for in terms of a water leak, because that leak in Seashell, that's 2.5% of the daily usage. That's a significant amount of water just being wasted, going out that way. If you found a few more of those, it would be happy days. So, but thank you. I know it's a dire situation. Whatever Gibson can do to assist, we will assist, and we'll have that conversation at 1 o'clock today. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Beamish, and we certainly appreciate that, and that's part of one of the good things about having gone to that coupling, or that uncoupling, I guess, the conscious uncoupling of Gibson's and the SCRD is now it's created the opportunity to have that shared system in place when we do come into these emergency measures. Next up, I have Director Hiltz, and then I'll be going back to Director Toth.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jim Rosenboom. Yeah, lots of good data for us to have more discussions about. And I'm going to follow up about Director Beamish. There's what to look for, and then if you see it, what do you do? Do you report to a number? Do you do an email? Do you do 911? What do we do? Because it's this, we're in it all together, and the spotting, the eyes on the ground. There's going to be 3 people up at Chapman Lake. They're not eyes on the ground. So the eyes on the ground, and what do the eyes do, and what do they see, and what do they say, and where do they say it to? So that's the one piece. In terms of the behavioral change that we're trying to implement, the discussion about throttling the system, the pressure systems, the different zones in the Chapman system. If you got 70 psi coming out of your tap, you use more than if there's 45 pounds coming out. So is that contemplated? It's a difficult thing when the system is not designed to do that, but manually throttling might be able to accomplish that. So whether that's something that's being considered. And I'll throw in the last one is the role of evaporation on Chapman Lake and the significant temperatures. Is there any way to actually quantify that? Thanks.
With respect to the remarks from Director Beamish and yourself, Director Hiltz, staff will work this week on social media to see how we can provide some guidance to residents on identifying leaks and reporting them to us. And any leaks or any questions about that can be sent by email to infrastructure@scrd.ca or through or by phone. In terms of reducing pressure, staff are looking at it, but it is challenging given that our system is gravity fed. So we need to make sure that there is always enough water in our reservoirs from a firefighting perspective. So if we reduce the pressure too much, we might lose that feature, the requirement. So yes, it's currently being looked at, and where possible, we will definitely implement it, because we can allow that. We can do that under stage 4 already. And your last part was?
Evaporation.
Okay, evaporation at the lake. Yes, some days it has been about 20 degrees up there as well. So yes, there has been significant evaporation there of water. Quantifying that's almost impossible for us based on the data we have right now.
Okay, thank you. Over to Director Toth and then Director McMahon.
Thank you, Chair. I had actually had that same question about turning down the pressure in the PRV stations, but I was looking at it from leak losses perspective. But where are we at with looking at the environmental flow needs for Chapman Creek? Because I know that was a project that we were looking at on whether the environmental flow numbers could be dialed back. And then is there any potential for us to look at partnerships with large private wells that might be in the Chapman service area, just as a temporary measure? I know that we have at least one large industrial well out in East Porpoise Bay. Is there any ability for us to connect into those even on a temporary emergency basis?
Okay, I will start with the last one. In terms of large private wells, we've been contacted by residents with a large well and at least large from a residential perspective, and they had excess capacity. For us, the challenge is that those wells, besides just the physical connection of the infrastructure and how to connect water from one to the other, first, all those wells would need to have a license. And I know that there are wells out there, private wells, that are being used for several purposes that are currently don't have a license yet. And actually, those licenses should, once they have it, they actually should list that water can be used for emergency for community water supply. But if there's a well available, if would be a license available for any of those wells, we would be able to maybe work with the ministry to expand that usage. So that's one criteria. It needs to have a water license that is in good standing and ultimately would allow for community use of that water. The second one is we need to get permit from Vancouver Coast Health. And that would most likely require some significant monitoring of those wells. And we have to see how long it would take actually to complete that monitoring, get the permit from Vancouver Coast Health to see if it's possible. But it doesn't mean that we're not looking at any potential use of those wells as well. If there are residents out there that or businesses that say, hey, let's have a conversation, have them connect with us, and we can see what we can do. Because especially towards late September, any water is water.
Thanks, GM. So because we are providing a community water source, we are slightly differently regulated than a private well. It is essentially what I heard in those last comments. So we have a different level of regulation that we do have to follow, and treatment, et cetera. Okay, next. Sorry, go ahead.
There was the other question about the environmental flow needs. I'm not forgetting that one. That was your first. The current situation is that this is most likely a year that pink salmon, they're running every second year, and this is a year that they are running. So I expect them to be holding up at the mouth of Chapman Creek at the moment. So if we would reduce the flows currently, it will have an environmental impact, but it's definitely something that in discussions with the regulatory agencies, in this case DFO as well as Flintward, will further assess, especially when we move towards implementing emergency response measures, that we reduce the EFN.
Thank you. Over to Director McMahon.
Thank you. And Chair Pratt, you should take a turn if you have a list of questions too. All right, so many questions. I'm going to follow up leaks for a moment. If we have, are there significant leaks on private property that we are having difficulty resolving, and what are the tools that we can use? I've been asked this.
Yes, and there are still some large private leaks on properties, and we're actively working with residents to get them resolved. And that actively working means that we contact them in writing and by phone to work with them to identify their leaks, because usually that's one issue, that they might see, they might acknowledge that there is a leak, but they are not able to identify where it is on their water lines. So we work with them to see where are their leaks, and if no resolution, especially now during stage 4, if no resolution is found, we can provide notice for water shutoff, and there are currently water shutoff notifications outstanding. So if those leaks are not resolved shortly, the water will be shut off to those properties.
And I will say that I do know anecdotally of people who have had their water shut off because the leak was not fixed in a timely manner. I had myself on the list next, and then I'll go back to the other questions that we have. So I just wanted to clarify. So when we have a team that hikes into Chapman to check on our siphon or fly in, how long of a day is that for them to go in into Chapman Lake? Because I understand it is a significant hike in.
It's a full day hike.
Yeah, 18 kilometers round trip. Yeah, so that's a long day. And if they're not able to helicopter in, which of course would be more time efficient, it is a significant day, and it's a significant amount of resources for a day. So also regarding the siphon that we do have on Chapman, so we do have a current permit that is for that. How long does that permit, like when's the expiry on that permit?
We just had it extended for another 2 years. We received it 2 weeks ago, so it's now good until August, late August 2023.
Okay. And once again, just to clarify, it is only for within stage 4.
Yeah, yeah. And I have to clarify, we received an extension on from Flintward to 2023, and our permit with BC Parks is valid until later this year. So we applied for an extension, but we haven't granted it yet. But I expect that to be no problem.
Okay. And that is only for within stage
It's
4?
only, we can activate the siphon only when stage 4 is issued. So it doesn't say that we need to activate the siphon the moment we declare stage 4, but we can. And so that's why last week stage 4 was declared, and today, if they can get up there, and otherwise tomorrow, the siphons will be activated.
Okay. And then I'm going to turn to one of our emergency responses, because now that we're in stage 4, and I think this is the piece that that really hit home with me on Friday when we spoke, GM Rosenboom, about you and I were on a call, and we were talking about stage 4, and this is our last stage before we hit emergency situation and we declare a sense of emergency, and or state of emergency, I should say. And one of our emergency measures is Trout Lake and activating that water source. And currently, Trout Lake is used extensively as a public swimming hole. And I pass by there daily, and there's numerous vehicles and people swimming. If we are to activate Trout Lake as a water source, would we need to also reduce public access to it?
Yes. Yes, I think Vancouver Health will require us to do so before we can activate it, because the water will be chlorinated. So I think from their perspective, the health will be secured. But I expect that Vancouver Health will require us to also limit the public use of Trout Lake.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to go back to my speakers list. I have Director Toth and then Director McMahon.
Thank you, Chair. I'll short follow-up actually to the state of emergency question. Do we have designated thresholds for declaring a state of emergency around our water supply? Do our taps need to run dry? You know, what do we need to do that? And then the follow-up question, of course, if we do declare a state of emergency, is that going to help our chances of getting this Church Road license approved? And could we proceed with construction before that was approved?
Okay, 2 questions. First one is about thresholds for declaring a state of emergency. I think the first, prior to that, activation of an emergency operations center would be required, and start preparing in the background for that as well. I don't expect it to happen in the upcoming weeks, but we will definitely make sure that we're ready for that. We don't have a fixed threshold, and it will all depend on the combination between where are we at in the season, what is the short and long-term weather forecast, is there any rain in the foresight. We are working closely, and we'll continue to work more closely in the upcoming weeks with Environment Canada to get really local weather forecasts from them, so that we have a good understanding of what is actually coming our way, not only for the entire region, but what is specifically coming our way? What can we expect? And so it will be a combination of factors between demand, where are we at in the season? Are we already past the September long weekend when we might have a little bit less tourists and second, people with their second homes here, maybe on the coast. It will all depend on those factors to for us to decide when something a drastic measure like that would be required. If it would actually increase our chance of or the timing of a church road license, I don't think so. I think the staff at the province are fully aware of our situation. I'll make sure that they are, and I think they are. I think also because they also look at the media, the question: can we proceed with construction prior to the issuance of a license? Is more a financial and legal risk question than a regulatory question. Because in theory, we can start tomorrow, or we can start the tendering process tomorrow. Only we do know if there are potentially other regulatory requirements coming out of the license that we don't foresee right now that might change, that might have an impact on the design or terms and conditions of the contract. But if desired, we can provide further information on that at the future staff meeting.
Okay, thank you. Director McMahon and then Director Beamish.
Okay, I have one more question about water use, and then I'm going to move on to farmers. Some time ago, staff were going to contact the largest residential water users in the system because, as we know, a very large proportion of our water is being used by a small number of residents, and that must be driving the 1,400 liters a day, because I can't imagine really what people are using the water for. So did staff follow up? And the farmers. So there are, I just learned there are 16 registered farms that are on the Chapman system. Do we know how much water those 16 farms use collectively? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yes, we followed up with the larger users and we'll continue to do so, especially as some of them are have leaks. Those are our primary concern at the moment. I was not able, between last Friday when you asked me for a list of the larger users and today to really get a good list together in a form that is presentable at this board meeting. But I will provide some more detailed analysis on that and actions taken to improve their water conservation at September IC meeting. In terms of the farms, there are 16 farms. 5 of them are on a commercial rate, so they pay for use, pay per cube, and the rest is on a flat rate. The differentiation was initiated because there are different, under the regulation, bylaw 42, there are different restrictions for if you are on a metered system or not. Because the commercial, one of the categories in the bylaw is for commercial food producers. Those are the 5 farms that are actually on a meter rate, and they can continue to provide water at all times during stage 3. Sorry, while the others, other 11, they would need to, during stage 3, would need to adhere to the water regulations that are in place for residents as well. Their actual usage, I don't have the data right now. I asked staff this morning to see if they could collected prior to this meeting, but I think I don't have it on my email box. No, I don't have it yet. So that's forthcoming as well. In 2018, we provided that, and 19, we provided that information to the board. And my recollection is that it was several percent of the total use during stage 4.
Thank you, GM. I just want to make a quick note for any of our members of the public that are watching, because I do see a hand raised within our Zoom gallery. We will, it's our process that we take questions at the end of the meeting. So you're not being ignored, but you will be, you'll be given space at that time at the end of our meeting to be able to ask your questions then. So I've got Director Beamish and then myself.
Yeah, thank you again. And I apologize for going back to this, but I'm going to go back to leaks just for a second. I just think that at stage 4, when we're looking at now considering going to emergency measures, that we should have no discretion on leaks, and that anybody should be given a 48-hour notice, and that's sufficient. Especially if they've been given notice at stage 2 and at stage 3, and now we're in stage 4, and if they haven't been fixed by now, we just have to move forward because the water is not in abundance, and it put the whole system at risk. So just my view, I think that we should be much more aggressive on that at this stage of the water. Thank you.
And is that, is it just the way the bylaw reads? Do we need to do, would we need to do a bylaw change, or is it staffing discretion at this point?
Thank you for the question. It's staffing discretion, and I'm going to work with staff to, that's as we did in previous stage 4 situations, to be more proactive indeed, moving towards shut-off.
Okay. Do you need any board direction on that, or no, it's all within staffing? Perfect, thank you. Okay, I've got myself on just, I wanted to just make a comment on behavioral change, and I know this is a tough topic because we're talking about, we've limited all outdoor water use within our system, or within our Chapman system, and which means that we next need to look at ourselves and see what we're doing within our own lives on how we're using our water within our homes, and really examine that. And I know at this point we haven't regulated through bylaw or through water use regulations for any indoor usage. So what we're asking is our public to make a behavioral change, and a huge behavioral change, because we've seen this year that we have not had that. We've seen the increase, and we know that everybody is under stress. We've been dealing with a pandemic, and frankly, frustration. I know that there is a lot of frustration in our community with how they perceive our lack of movement on our water projects, even though we are moving forward everything as quickly as possible. And we're waiting. We're waiting on those licenses. We're waiting as we follow our regulatory requirements to go through and increase water within our system. So we really, really need to each look within ourselves about how we're going to change our behavior on how much water we are using, because we are in a crisis situation when we are using 2,000 cubes a day more than what our system can handle. We're looking at an extended drought. We're still looking at more potential heat waves. We're looking at a rain event right now that's not going to do anything more. It's not going to sink into the ground. So I'll say I spoke with a friend this morning who was actually collecting water from the chairs on her deck to water her plants, and talking about how she reduces water and how because she thinks about this, because I talk with her regularly, and she's like, I used a bucket when I was waiting for the water to heat up, and that's gonna be the dog's water, or that's the water I'm gonna use for the plants. Looking at every way ourselves that we can change our water use behavior, because we have gotten water greedy within this country. And this is not an infinite resource. We're in a crisis. We're getting to be a crisis situation here on the Sunshine Coast. And it's dry out there. It's going to continue to be dry out there for significant more weeks. And it's scary when you go out and you walk. And if you think that, if you look into the interior, we've lost a town in our province because of fire. And what's going to happen going forward if we have a fire here on the Sunshine Coast? We need to protect for those emergency measures or emergency responses going forward. And we don't have a supply that we can tap into at this time. And we need to each look within ourselves and change our behavior and treat water as the precious resource that it is going forward. I've got Director Toth and then Director McMahon.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to comment on that, and then I've got another question for anybody who wants to answer it. You know, our public, our residents are used to behavioral changes. Yes, we're not as good as the national average. Yes, we're not as good as places in the prairies. But, you know, it's a common thought, belief, misconception, call it what you want, that we live in a rainforest. You know, climate change is proving to us that, you know, we're the canaries in the coal mine. The BC climate is no longer what it was 20, 30, 50 years ago. But our residents are frustrated with this. They're tired of the regular and ongoing issues. But I believe that generally they're trying. You know, being just about the only place in British Columbia with blue skies and low COVID rates, I think is currently having a larger issue on our water supply than we're acknowledging. I don't have any numbers to back it up, but we know, you know, the ferries are jammed every weekend. They're jammed during the week. Yeah, I don't know what tourist numbers look like, but I'm sure that we're seeing an unhealthy level of tourism for the water supply situation that we're in right now. So that's sort of my comments. My question, what's next? Because given that it's going to take us 4 years to get Church Road approved and brought online, it's 2021. We need to solve the water deficit for 2025 this year, because it's going to take us several years to get permits approved. So I'm just looking to see if staff have any comments, if directors have any thoughts or comments, because we need to know before the end of this year what we're going to do to solve the deficit for 2025. Thank you.
Director McMahon.
Right, sorry, different buttons. I was actually, I'll come back to farmers, but I would like to see staff kind of take a look at all of the projects we have, all of the test wells we've drilled, and, you know, look at a Plan B and Plan C. You know, Plan B, if we cannot get Church Road approved in a timely way or at all, what do we do then? And Plan C, what if we cannot get any projects approved in Aquifer 570? The Grantham's, Gibson's, Elphinstone Aquifer. What if we get hung up on that aquifer and can't get our permits there? What do we do? So I realize we're not going to have that today, but I would like to see that going forward.
I think it's important to note that we are already we are doing the test wells and drills in other areas, which essentially is our Plan B or Plan C, because it's part of our whole plan. I've heard anecdotally from workers within the tourism industry, and I think when the numbers come out from Sunshine Coast Tourism later this year, we're going to see the actual stats on what tourism has been on the coast, and it is exponentially grown. And it's because we've become a place, because people can't go to the Okanagan, people can't go overseas. we're seeing a huge increase in our provincial tourism here onto the coast because, as Director Toth just said, we have low COVID rates here, we have beautiful blue skies, and we are very easy to access from the Lower Mainland and from anywhere. So our tourism rates have grown exponentially here on the coast. I think we'll see that. I know that anecdotally, but I think when we actually see the stats at the after the season, we'll see the proof in the pudding there. I'll go over to GM Rosenboom because I see your hand up to maybe discuss the projects that we've, as Director McMahon and her questions were related to.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Langdale well development project. Earlier this year, the board approved the budget to do the engineering and start the permitting on that project. If we hope to, as I indicated earlier, to get that project awarded to a contractor shortly. Already monitoring is underway so that there is no delay in terms of permitting, so that we have the required data to actually apply for a permit there. Anticipated timeline is 2024. And that includes some buffer that in terms of timing based on our experience with Dirt Road. It will require, of course, consultation with Squamish Nation as well on the project, and I hope to initiate those discussions in upcoming months with them on that project. Cray Creek, the board approved the budget to confirm the potential to expand our water intake at Cray Creek. And that is actually, if the current water intake and water treatment supply, treatment system there only allows it to be used during low flows when the turbidity is low, and the upgraded treatment system would allow us to use it early in the year as well. And what we have to do there is to confirm if the creek flows in that creek are actually sufficient to support that kind of withdrawal year-round. And so additional monitoring is going to occur there, and then we would potentially need an amendment to our water license, but we already have a water license there, so it would be an amendment, and then we can immediately go to construction there of the project. I think a good resource for the community to look at is the Let's Talk Water event from April 26th. This is my memory. I think it was April or March. At that meeting, at that Let's Talk Water meeting, we presented several scenarios for how to address the water supply deficit by 2025 and 2035. And it indicated that with meters installed prior to 2025 and the Langdale project online, we would meet the water supply demand of the community at that time, including the impacts of climate change and growth. If the Langdale project, for example, would be delayed, we already have the Cray Creek project currently in the works as well. So one of the two projects will definitely be able to be completed by 2025. So I can provide further information that at the future committee meeting, but there are multiple projects underway that we can prioritize based on progress on others.
Follow-up, Director McMahon?
Yeah, follow-up. My concern is that our projections don't take two things into account. One is the radically increased tourism, and the other one is heat domes. We never had a heat dome before. And I wonder if our projections are sufficiently conservative.
Yeah, that's the term of 2021 is heat dome. That was That was a new one for all of us.
In terms of growth and tourism, we are currently working with the 2% growth rate, while the actual over the last several years has been lower on average. However, I'm curious to see what this year's data will look like. But in our projection, we're accounting for 2% growth year over year over year over year. So it's about the average. As long as the average is below 2%, then we would stay within our means. And one of the projects that was approved as well for this year is to start working on an update to comprehensive water plan, water supply plan for the regional water system. And that included a review of the assessment of our water supply deficit as first established in 2018. And I think that it will be the analysis where we need to look at to what extent do we capture the tourism impact of tourism right. Because that's where it really makes the difference, because we included growth, a specific growth factor, and I think there is an opportunity to improve the way we included the impact of tourism there, because it's it's not an impact that's that big, for example, in June, but it's primarily June and July and August when we have that impact. So it's definitely on the radar, and I will add it to the list to be looked at as part of that project.
Director McMahon, did you want to speak to farmers before I go back to Director Toth?
Why don't we finish this topic and then go to farmers?
Okay. Is there anyone else on the expansion, Director Toth?
Thank you, Chair. This was discussed and determined before I joined the board. I believe Director Lamb was here at the time. What would it take for us to revisit the Dusty Road well? Unconfined aquifers are used to supply water all over the province every single day, every single year, around agriculture, around mining. I know that there were some concerns about potential contamination or what have you. You know, Lehigh still needs to follow provincial regulations around the protection of groundwater. Contamination shouldn't be an issue for this well site. And it's clear that the flows would be of immense use for our community 2025 and beyond. So just wanted to hear from staff if there's any potential to continue moving that forward.
Thank you for the question. What I can do is, at a future meeting, I can present a couple of slides and a little bit of information on that topic for the board. For the board's information, we prepared some additional material for water advisory committee, water supply advisory committee early this year on that specific topic, and I will make sure that it will be brought forward at the future ISC as well.
Okay. Director McMahon, back to you, please.
Right. Farmers have requested an exemption from the stage 4 watering restrictions. In some ways, this is a little concerning. This is the 4th time we've gone to stage 4 since 2015. So it shouldn't be entirely a surprise that we're having water supply problems. But I still think that people were a little taken aback at how quickly we reached stage 4. And it is early in the season for agriculture. You know, if we go to stage 4 in late September, it doesn't have that big an impact on the agriculture, but it does at this time of year. We have to make a decision today whether to grant that exemption or not, because the farms have been without water for a week, and that's about as much as far as they can go before they lose everything. So Given that they are a relatively small percentage of the water use, I would like to move that we grant the registered farms a stage 4 exemption for 2 weeks, starting today.
Okay, so Director McMahon has made that as a motion. I don't have a seconder for it, but I do have a GM with his hand up. So I'm going to go to my GM first.
Thank you very much. I just conveyed, had a quick discussion with our corporate officer. And given that what is allowed under stage 4 or not is included in our bylaw, it's in Appendix G of bylaw 422, the bylaw would need to be amended to grant an exemption. The bylaw does not allow currently exemptions to be granted other than by amendments to the bylaw.
Okay, so over to the corporate officer, what would be required in order to amend the bylaw at this time?
Oh, thank you, Chair. So we would have to bring the bylaw forward with the proposed amendment to a board meeting for consideration of readings and adoption at that time. So the board cannot make a resolution that is contrary to provisions within the bylaw. The bylaw takes precedent over the board resolution. So if we wish to change something that is in the bylaw, that is set out as a regulation in the bylaw, then we would need to bring that bylaw forward with the proposed amendment, as Director McMahon has stated in her resolution, and then the board could consider that for readings at that time.
Okay, and what kind of timeline would we be, because we need to convene another board meeting, would
Yes,
we not?
Yes, so we could, timeline in terms of how quickly we could schedule a board meeting?
And if Director McMahon's proposed resolution happened to go forward, what would be, I just want clarity on what the process would be. Like, we would need to bring it forward. It would have to be a special board meeting because our next board meeting isn't until September.
Right.
So what the timeline on that would look like.
So we could potentially schedule another special board meeting within 5 days.
Okay. And so within 5 days, and then it would be, we could do the bylaw amendment reading all within that meeting.
Yes.
Okay. And then it would be in effect, so it would be from 5 days from today. Okay, so does anybody else require any clarity on that? Director Toth?
Yeah, just a process question. In 2018, it was asked for, not granted. But in 2015, it was granted. So was a bylaw amendment passed in 2015 to facilitate that?
Thank you. Based on our very limited historical record search we did in the last hour, it was not. It was done by resolution, but we have to confirm if at that time the drought restrictions were included in the bylaw or not.
Director McMahon?
Yeah, I have some concerns about our ability to respond in a timely way to an emergency. Like having to modify an entire bylaw in order to help some people out during a drought is very cumbersome, to put it mildly. And I would like to see us do something now. If we declared a state of emergency, could we do that?
Corporate Officer?
Thank you, Chair. So I was going to say also, we do have the ability to call an emergency board meeting, which would waive the notice provisions of 5 days. So we could call an emergency board meeting tomorrow if we choose to.
Okay. And it's important to, I'm going to ask for confirmation of this from the Corporate Officer, but this is part of the restrictions that we have that are put in by the Local Government Act, and correct? That in order to do this is the process we have to follow because it's within our regulation.
In
and our
terms of how we call meetings?
or
Yes.
and responding in this kind of situation.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody else require clarity on this, Director McMahon?
Can I request that we call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning?
For the purpose
For the purpose of amending the stage 4 watering restrictions.
Okay, so you're making that as a motion. Do I see a seconder for that motion?
Process question, Chair. Should we not deal with Director McMahon's first motion because staff don't have direction to proceed with a bylaw amendment at this time?
Well, her first motion never received a seconder. We were just having questions on it, so technically it just dies without a seconder. So I'm looking to my directors for what kind of direction you would like to have on this. And I see Director Beamish.
Yeah, I guess what I heard Director McMahon asking for is the ability within the bylaw, within the provisions of the bylaw, to grant an exemption given the current situation. And it was a temporary exemption for 2 weeks. How big of an amendment would that be to the bylaw? And could that be added on to the end of this agenda?
Over to the corporate officer.
Thank you, Chair. I don't recommend crafting a bylaw amendment on the fly, which is essentially what we would be doing
Yeah.
if we were to do it today at this meeting. That being said, we would have to look at the bylaw and see where it makes sense, where it would fit, and it would be a provision similar to what we did with our procedures bylaw when we first went into the pandemic. We amended it even prior to the ministerial meetings order to allow for electronic meetings. So it would be along the same lines, and we would likely check in with our legal counsel to ensure that we're following proper process on that amendment.
Then I'm happy to second the motion to hold an emergency meeting.
So I have a mover and a seconder to have an emergency meeting tomorrow for the purpose of bylaw amendment to prioritize farming for a temporary measure for farming for 2 weeks. And I think that covers it for watering for 2 weeks. I'm going to go to GM Rosenboom.
Sorry, wrong mic. By tomorrow, I can also provide information about the actual water use. What the usage was by the farmers in July. That's what I can provide. And that we have to realize in July, part of that was stage 1, part of the majority was stage 2, part of it was stage 3, but I can provide the average, what it was over the month, so that at least we have, the board has some idea about what is the magnitude of what are we talking about here on a daily basis.
Because it is important to note that if we're going to allow outdoor water use for, it is going to impact our usage on the system as a whole, and we're already over what our best case scenario should be. So, Director McMahon.
And just to be clear, my motion was registered farms. This is not all outdoor food growing. It is strictly registered farms.
It's the 16 farms that we have in our system as being, yeah.
Okay. Okay. I have a speakers list, so I'm going to Director Ties, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I am a little worried that we're not below that 12,000 cubic meters per day, which would give us some sort of leniency towards adding more demand to the system. I do appreciate that we want, especially registered farms, to be able to use water. But I think if we're going to go down this route, we really need to up our efforts in communicating to the public that it is absolutely crucial and essential that our water usage needs to come down, and because I don't see this being a good option when we can't get to below 12,000 cubic meters per day, including the exemption usage, because essentially what we're doing is then digging our grave faster. So those are just my thoughts. I think as part of, if we're going to go down this route, I think we really need to come together to come up with a really good communications plan and make sure that we need to communicate that people need to cut down on their water use. Otherwise, I don't know if we can put in projected dates of when we will run out of water at current water usage, or something to actually drive home that we have a finite supply, and granting exemptions is not going to help things.
Great points, Director Ties. It is worrisome. I mean, we're also concerned about food security on the Sunshine Coast too. So there's a lot of factors at play here. Director McMahon, I have you next on the list, and then I have Director Lee and then Director Beamish.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that one of the troubling things about our bylaws as they're currently set up is that it's not a level playing field for businesses. Right, if the business has outdoor water usage, they're cut off, but the ones with indoor water usage have no restrictions. So it's very difficult and very troubling, and how we're going to deal with this in the long term, I don't know, but in the short term, I think we should grant that exemption to those registered farms. Thank you.
Okay, Director Lee.
Yes, I just had a couple of questions about the emergency meeting. Is there a requirement for a period of notice to the general public we're holding one?
Thank you. No, the notice requirement is actually waived for an emergency meeting. Even notice requirement to directors, which is the notice requirement for special meetings, is waived in the event of an emergency meeting.
Okay, and a second question is, do we need provincial approval for the bylaw amendment before we can put it into force?
No, we don't.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Lee. Director Beamish and then Director Toth.
Yeah, speaking to the bylaw amendment, will the bylaw amendment be specific then to registered farms, and should it be by application? Because maybe they may not all need it. There may be some who have taken care of some alternate water sources. And can we, I guess there are no registered farms that have grow-ops growing in the outdoors, but I'd certainly hate to think we're watering marijuana plants at this stage. So.
Thank you for the question. I would recommend that the directors just provide as much direction as possible so that we can contemplate the amendment. Just looking at the bylaw right now, I'm contemplating that we will pull the Schedule J and likely amend Section 4 of that for Stage 4. We do provide an exemption for livestock under Stage 4, so we would provide wording for something similar. What's captured in the resolution at the moment is a temporary measure for 2 weeks, is my understanding. Starting when? Immediately, as soon as the bylaw is adopted. It could be in effect as soon as tomorrow. And then it would run for 2 weeks, and that it would only apply to farms with registered farm status. That is my understanding of the amendment.
Yes, that is that's the direction from the conversation that we've had so far. Okay. Over to Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. My household used 185 liters in the last 24 hours. We're a household of 3. We were used around 200 liters the 24-hour period before that. It continues to blow my mind that usage is so high from people. You know, we don't use water outside, period, full stop. I've got mixed feelings about the farm exemption if we risk running out of water, but I will support this going forward to an additional meeting because it's a big issue. We need to have a big conversation around it. My question for the corporate officer is, if we're making this amendment for this year, I'm wondering if we should make the amendment so that it could be granted with a board resolution in future years. Just leave it in the bylaw that it could be a 2-week exemption could be granted by the board in future years.
Thank you for the question. I've actually posed that question with legal, and I've been told no, that a board resolution cannot waive the provision of a bylaw. It's kind of a circular authority. So the best practice would be to actually put in either the conditions by which we would grant the exemption, or a time frame for which we would grant the exemption from the bylaw. But the board cannot waive the provisions of their bylaws by resolution.
That answer your question, Director Toth? Okay. I have Director Lee and then Director McMahon.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just wondering the logic for a 2-week only exemption.
Go ahead, Director McMahon.
Sure. Well, we can discuss this tomorrow if we go ahead with an emergency meeting, but if we are still in the same water situation in 2 weeks, I think that the farms will have had enough warning that they're going to have to come up with a contingency plan, because if we run out of water, everybody runs out of water. It's not a question of whether they will continue to have water indefinitely. We're all going to run out of water. But it would hopefully get them over 2 of the most productive growing weeks of the year. And then we could move on from there. And since I've got the floor, I just wanted to add that we are obviously in need of an agricultural water strategy going forward. I think we had not really moved on that because we had all hoped that we would have additional water supply in place by now, but we don't. So this is another piece of the work that needs to be done, but not today. Thank you.
Thanks. And I will say one thing that's been very interesting that has come up regarding agriculture and farms and the infrastructure that comes from, or pardon me, the support that comes from the Ministry of Agriculture is the Ministry of Agriculture will they will support crop loss, but they don't tend to support enough of the infrastructure put in place that will stop crop loss and help with helping with infrastructure, putting in wells and all of this. And this is one of the pieces that's come clear to me over the last few days as we've been discussing things with farmers and also with the media in going forward with the as this is receiving more light, is that there's more that can be done provincially to assist farmers in preventing loss and helping them to support infrastructure that is proactive rather than reactive after the situation. So, Director McMahon, I still have you on the speakers list. Okay. I don't have a speakers list now anymore. So we do have a motion on the floor for an emergency board meeting tomorrow and over to my corporate officer, please.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just clarify the time for that meeting?
We don't have a time. I was going to actually ask that. What time is best? Because we need to make sure that staff has enough time to craft and look at and also, any implications. Because there's significant implications.
Chair, my apologies.
We would suggest tomorrow afternoon.
Tomorrow
So our regular start time in the afternoon would be 2 p.m., if that's amenable.
2 p.m. is the suggested start time. Director Toth?
Thank you, Chair. That was going to be my suggestion, to give staff time to consult within their departments and to consult legal if they needed to.
Yeah. Okay. So would you like me to add that specifically in as an amendment?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, may I ask one of my directors to make that? I see that Director Toth, seconded by Director McMahon, that 2 p.m. for the special board meeting tomorrow, which is August the 17th, 2021, to discuss bylaw amendment for prioritizing farm exemption for 2 weeks for registered farms. That's the essential synopsis. So I'm going to call a question on the amendment for 2 p.m. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. So we have an amended motion on the floor for a 2 p.m. start time for a special, or pardon me, emergency board meeting in regards to the bylaw amendment for bylaw 422. Is everyone clear on the purpose of the motion? And are there any other questions before I call the question on this and we vote on it? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? No, it carries. So we'll be back here tomorrow at 2 p.m. to discuss the, for an emergency board meeting. Now I have Director McMahon, and then I know Director Toth as well. So Director McMahon?
Yes, again on the farming topic, but I was wondering if staff have any updates on our cistern rebates for the large water systems, because several of the farming community were looking at buying the super large cisterns. And first off, do we have any rebates left that we could offer? And secondly, if we do have some rebates available, could we put in an accelerated process so that people can qualify for those rebates quickly so that they can purchase the cisterns? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. This year, there's still budget left within our rainwater harvesting rebate program. So we welcome applicants to submit their application. In terms of processing time, we can review fully completed application within couple in a day kind of days. It's really quickly. That's not the issue. The thing I would like to add there is that the criteria is it needs to be a rainwater harvesting system. So if tanks are currently being purchased, the application would need to be for an entire rainwater harvesting system, which includes how do you get the water from your roof, how big is your roof, is it big enough, what do you do with leaf catchers, etc., etc., etc. All that needs to be included in the application. And then the applicant will get approval from acceptance from us on the application, which will give them, which will earmark funds for them, and will give them 90 days to actually install the entire structure. As part of that installation process, I can totally see that farmers would install the tanks right away and the rest later, but within 90 days they would have to complete everything. Thank you.
Thank you. So I've got Director Toth next on my list.
Thank you, Chair. I believe that our residents do want to do the right thing when it comes to the conservation side of things, but they're tired. They're tired of perceived inaction on the supply front. We know that there are things going on. You know, many of our public do, some of our public don't. It's all over the place. I know that I'm defending this board and this organization on a daily basis against criticisms online and in person from people who are tired, and I will happily continue to do so. But ultimately, the public is tired of needless restrictions in what is generally considered to be a wet climate. They're tired of watching their gardens die. They're tired of delays and inactions, whether it's our fault or the fault of the provincial government. It's clear to me that our community is upset, and they're looking for us to do more. I've been encouraging residents to write to the minister responsible for Flynn Road on a regular and ongoing basis, as well as our MLA, to urge them to take action on our water license. This board is looking for more. You know, we know this crisis. We live here. We're in it too. We've been patiently waiting on the province to issue the authorizations we need for the Church Road well, but I think it's time that we increase the pressure on the province to do the right thing. So having said all that, I do have a recommendation that I would like to move. I did forward it to the board, corporate officer, and the recording secretary prior to the start of this meeting. That the SCRD, recognizing the pressures that climate change and recent growth have had on our regional water supply and the delays from the provincial government in issuing a water license for the Church Road wellfield, implement a temporary moratorium on new water service connections in the regional water service as serviced primarily by Chapman Creek, effective September 14th, 2021. And that the SCRD write a letter to Katrine Conroy, the minister responsible for Flynn Road, outlining A, that a water license for Church Road wellfield was promised expediency by the previous minister at a 2019 UBCM meeting due to the health and safety concerns around ensuring an adequate water supply. B, that climate change has resulted in challenges to our current ability to rely on Chapman and Edward Lakes and watersheds, and that additional sources of supply are urgently needed. C, that conservation alone is insufficient to meet the demands of our growing community. And D, that without new sources of water being ultimately authorized by the provincial government, the SCRD cannot in good conscience continue to accept increased demand on our strained water system. And further, that the temporary new connection moratorium stay in place until such time as the provincial government has issued the long-awaited water license for the Church Road wellfield. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Toth. So Director Toth, I'm going to park that motion just for a second before I look for a seconder, and I'm going to go over to staff first. So CAO, please.
Thank you. It's a complicated issue. Essentially, there's no specific authority given to us for a blanket moratorium on development approvals. And so to entertain something like this, we'd have to look very specifically at different categories of development applications to see within those categories if there's any potential control techniques, such as denying applications if there's water issues. So one would be looking at zoning applications. Those land use decisions are within the discretion of the board. A concern over water supply could be an acceptable rationale for not approving a specific rezoning application on a case-by-case basis. For development permits, the only authority for refusal of a development permit relates to conditions or guidelines set out in the official community plan. And in the absence of that, there's no general discretion on a broad level to refuse based on water supply issues. For subdivision, potentially a carefully worded refusal to approve a subdivision based on basically clear statutory grounds. So an example of that would be excess cost to local government, or potentially residual discretionary grounds contrary to the public interest. It might be possible for an approving officer to refuse a subdivision application under those circumstances, and it may survive a judiciary challenge, but it could be challenged. And for building permits, an applicant for a building permit is entitled as of right to a building permit if they comply with the building bylaw and building code. So one would have to look to any provisions in those two enactments regarding water supply as a basis to refuse a building permit. It would be a very difficult area to control, an area or tool for controlling or managing growth due to water supply. So the short answer is very complicated. We would have to do a lot more research if we were going to entertain trying to develop any of those measures, and it would have limited applicability potentially based on the type of applications we'd be refusing for those reasons.
Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. There is precedent, even here on the coast, for disallowing connection to a service where the service does not have the capacity. Seashell, we extended our sewer up Wakefield Road within the last couple of years, and we had a house that was under construction at the time. They were not granted a septic field. They were basically told by VCH that sewer's coming, hook up to sewer. Ultimately, the project was delayed for Wakefield Road, and the property owner did finish their building. They finished their house, and they couldn't occupy it because they could not hook up to sewer until such time as our project had the capacity or piping to facilitate that connection. I have spoken to elected, both past and present, and the consensus is that this should be defensible. It could very well be challenged. I think our public are well aware of what's going on here with the water situation. By the time a challenge made its way through, hopefully it would be enough pressure on the province that we'd have our water use license and we could lift the moratorium. So.
Okay, and Director Toth, may I have clarity on, so you're suggesting a moratorium for how long? I'm sorry, I missed on how long you had that in there.
So I'm suggesting a temporary moratorium on the regional supply as serviced primarily by Chapman Creek. Everywhere else can keep going. I've suggested September 14th as the start date. That gives 4 weeks notice for anybody with a construction project on the go. It also happens to be the first day of UBCM, and that was not entirely accidental on my part. And I'm suggesting that this temporary moratorium be in place until the provincial government issues the water license for Church Road.
Okay, so Director McMahon?
Yeah, I have the usual question. If we were a municipality, could we do this, or is this another situation where it's because we're a regional district and Modi handles the subdivision approvals that we can't do this?
CAO?
I don't have an answer to that question right now, but one thing maybe we could do, there's a lot to contemplate in that potential motion. We do have an emergency meeting scheduled for tomorrow afternoon at 2. If you would like to hold off on that motion until tomorrow afternoon at 2, it would give us a bit of time to complete more research and potentially be in a better position to provide meaningful answers that are helpful.
Okay. And regarding process, because we have an emergency board meeting on one subject, would we have to make an additional motion to add this one on?
Thank you, Chair. Did we receive Director Toth's motion? Is it on the floor right now? Has it been
It
seconded?
has not been seconded.
Okay.
It has only been, it's only out there. I haven't allowed for a seconder to happen as of yet.
So if it was already on the floor, then the motion could be made to refer it to tomorrow's meeting, or we can simply just leave it and then bring it forward tomorrow on the agenda, and you don't need to make a board motion to that effect. We would just take note of that direction
Okay,
and add it to the agenda.
okay. Director Toth? I'm going to look to you because I haven't actually allowed for a seconder to happen with this yet. We can either second it and refer it to tomorrow, or we can look for a motion now. I know this is significant, and this is a risk. This is a political. I'm not gonna sugarcoat anything. This is a move to make to put pressure and also show that we're serious about this. So I'm going to. I do have a speakers list that we can go through first, but I have not yet allowed for a seconder for this motion. So, Director Toth, I'll go to you first.
Thank you, Chair. I'm okay either way, whether we want to try and deal with this today or whether we want to deal with it tomorrow. I have been talking about this with staff and directors for a couple of months now. This is not, there are no surprises here in what I'm bringing forward today. So I am happy to take the will of the remaining board members.
Okay. So either way, we can either continue to discuss this today, because I also recognize that we do have other items of business on today, and we could take this and just ask staff to bring this forward tomorrow as part of the emergency board meeting. It hasn't actually hit the floor because it hasn't been seconded, but I understand from the corporate officer this can be brought into tomorrow's meeting and have further discussion on it then. Director Lee, I see your hand up.
I was waiting to see whether we were going to talk about it today or leave it for the emergency tomorrow before I ask my question, so.
Okay. I'm going to suggest that we leave this one for tomorrow. and discuss it in contemplation with the other, because we can go far further in depth. We're already 2 hours into this board meeting today, and we have a significant water conversation that we'll be having tomorrow afternoon as well, and it will also allow directors to continue to do some more research on this. Director Toth?
Thank you, Chair. I would actually prefer that you call for a seconder for this, to put it on the floor now, and then we refer it to tomorrow's meeting. That gets it into the public record. That makes sure anybody looking at minutes knows that this is something that came up in today's conversation.
Okay, I'm okay with that. I'll look for a seconder then, seconded by Director McMahon. And then I will also look for a motion to refer this to tomorrow's meeting, emergency board meeting. Move Director McMahon, seconded by Director Ties. All those in favor of referral to tomorrow's emergency meeting? Thank you. Those opposed? Motion carries. So this will be referred to tomorrow's emergency board meeting. Okay? Anything else on water today? Or can we, I'm going, Director McMahon?
Yeah, just a couple of quick requests from staff. Are we going to start getting weekly water updates again? Because there's been a number of requests for them. And if we can get that list of the 20 largest water users for the next water update, that would be appreciated. And the question has arisen as to whether we should hold a public information meeting of some sort about the water crisis. And I'd be interested in staff's feedback on that one.
GM Rosenboom?
Thank you for the question. I'm not sure if it's beneficial at this point in time, but I think it should be something that's contemplated in light of any emergency measures that might need to be taken.
And then the other question around the weekly updates.
Yes, noted.
Thank you. Director Toth?
Thank you, Chair. One final question on water from me. The presentation today, I hope it's going to be uploaded to the website for the public.
Yes, it will be later today.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to take, I'm going to say, 8-minute break to, or pardon me, a 7-minute break to 11:35, just to allow everybody to stretch their legs, and then we'll be back with the remainder of this agenda. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and welcome back to the special board meeting of the Sunshine Coast Regional District here on Monday, August 16th, 2021. We're going to continue through our agenda. Next up, we have Annex A, pages 1 through 5 of your package, and it's the contract for the Seashell Landfill Drop-Off Remediation Project, the financial update. And I'll go over to General Manager Remco Rosenboom of Infrastructure Services for this information. Remco, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's not with pleasure at all that I have to bring back this report to you for a financial amendment with respect to the to this project. We knew that when we're going into this project that there would be a lot of uncertainties associated with this project, given that we didn't know how the ground would respond to the rapid impact compaction and etc. and some other considerations. So what we now discovered is that the impact of the rapid impact compaction was different than what we anticipated to be, and as a result we had to do a partially redesign of our new drop-off area, which resulted in additional soil material to be brought in, and had some other implications on other components with associated costs as effects. As well, when we're doing a detailed assessment of the scale building at the site, we confirmed that it was completely infested with mice and rats. And after consultation with our chief building inspector, it was concluded that renovating that structure to address the infestation would be more costly and risky than replacing it with another used version. So we opted for the later version. And this report addresses both issues and the financial consequences of that. And it requests for an additional budget of about $250,000 for the project. Thank you, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great. Well, not great, but thank you, GM Rosenboom. I'm going to look to directors to see for any questions that you have in regards to this report. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. On page 3, it's identified that construction oversight for the additional, looks like 4 weeks to me, is going to be an increased $35,000. I just wanted a little more clarity on what that number entails, because it's clear to me that I'm in the wrong business.
Thank you very much for the question. Construction oversight means that our engineering contractor is on site on a daily basis to provide construction oversight to confirm if the actual construction is as per the design, and to address inquiries from the contractor on how to interpret specs and drawings as well. So it's really our conduit between us as the owner of the project and the contractor in terms of the actually construction on site. And this is for a four-week extension of the current contract.
Okay, Director Beamish and then Director Ties.
A question in terms of the budget. We have a contingency going into this project of $89,000 or almost $90,000, which is normally what a contingency is for, is to anticipate any overruns. But we're still showing the amended budget as having a further contingency. Should we not be absorbing the contingency? Are we not closer to a true number with the new budget, that the contingency actually gets used as opposed to puts on top of the new budget? And then the second question I have is a response related to the scale building. What kind of modular building are we buying from the contractor as opposed to the type of unit, say they have a Sailor Soils there, which is a very modest type of staff building for their scale building.
Thank you for both questions. In terms of the contingency fund, this is the table at page 3 presents the budget and not the expenditures. And I can indicate that a significant amount of the contingency allowance currently is already allocated.
Okay.
So this is the budget. So yes, there is the large part of this contingency is currently already allocated and being used. And it's proposed that, for example, the additional construction oversight is also paid out of this contingency allowance and hence not increasing further the budget. In terms of the second question, the scale building that we're looking for is a modular building, similar to what, for example, Sailor Soils currently has in place. It's one of those mobile units that are, I think we're eyeing one that was used, I think, on a prior construction site as well, as an office, as a construction office. So it's in terms of level of detail of finishing, it's low.
Yeah.
Okay. I had a little housekeeping thing that I forgot to do at the beginning of the meeting, and that was a motion to receive all reports and presentation items. So if I could do that, please. I see Director Toth, Director Ties, all of those in favor. Thank you. My apologies. I will go next to the next person on my speakers list, which is Director Ties, and then Director Hiltz, you're on deck.
Yeah, thank you. Regarding Director Toth's first question, I do wonder why somebody needs to be there all day, every day. That certainly doesn't happen on most builds on the coast that I'm familiar with. But that being said, you know, there may be some different requirements here. But so yeah, just following up on that. And then also, what's happening with the old building? Is it going to get landfilled?
Thank you for the question. Yes, the old building will be demolished and landfilled, and any parts that couldn't be recycled will, of course, be recycled. In terms of the need for construction of a site, this part of this type of contract provides that there is an engineering consultant. It's a CCD contract. Provide that there is construction oversight of the project by the engineer. That's a requirement of the contract. And if the contractor wouldn't provide that oversight, staff would need to do it, and staff currently don't have the capacity nor the skill, doesn't have the staff available with the skill set required to provide such construction oversight. And that's especially not in the solid waste, with solid waste expertise, but even on the utility side, we're still very short-staffed on engineering technicians to support capital projects, so we won't have the capacity in-house.
Okay, next up, I have Director Hiltz and then Director Toth.
Thanks, Chair. Just wanted to share the grief about the project, so just commiserating on that one. But it's the service disruption that I want to focus on. So on page 4 about moving the scale and the service disruption, and it says special arrangements will be made for curbside. So just kind of scoping out what the disruption will be is no public to site, but will curbside continue on the schedule that has become established now? Just, it took a little bit to get the current schedule going, so I hope the momentum to continue with the current schedule is going to continue. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Arrangements have been made that the curbside collection trucks will be wait at a different location on the coast, so there will be no interruption to that service. And even if that service changes a little bit, to address the labor shortage with the contractor, there will be no impact to that due to this project. Thank you.
Okay. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. Just to ask a follow-up about this structure that we're acquiring to act as the new scale building. I know that the one that we have has been there for a long time, and it's identified in the report that this structure shouldn't require any substantial maintenance in the next 10 years. I was just wondering if we're planning on doing any additional work to this thing to rodent-proof it, metal mesh, things of that sort, before we place it. I'd hate to read about in the newspaper in 10 years' time that this thing's got to be demolished because it's full of rodents too.
The other one. Yes, I will make sure that these kind of things don't occur moving forward.
Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, last question. It's on the moving of the scale again. It says it may trigger a project cost increase. So are those in tested? This would be over and above where we are now. And is there? Well, it's very early to determine to guess that would be, but it would not be included in the contingency that's there. Is that the anticipation that there will be another request coming forward? No.
No, I don't. Sorry. Thank you for the question. I don't anticipate further increases to happen. Please not. Thank you.
Okay. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I begrudgingly will move the recommendations as presented. I'm not happy with the cost escalation, but it needs to get done.
Okay. I have a begrudging motion, and may I have a begrudging seconder? Seconded Director Hiltz. I'm sorry, I shouldn't use that kind of language, but at the same time, we all feel that way. I know that. Seeing no one else on the speakers list, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Okay. Next up, we have Annex B of the package, which is pages 6 through 9, and that's a request for proposal, RFP 21350003 contract award for engineering consulting services for SCRD landfills and transfer station. And with GM Rosenboom, are you handling this as well?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, over to you, please.
We have a standing contract with an engineering firm to provide ongoing engineering support for our two SCRD disposal sites, Pender Harbor Transfer Station and the Seashell landfill. Our current contract expired on July 31st, and we went out for an RFP. And this report is to provide you with recommendations on to award the contract for the next several years to XAG Consulting Ltd, which is also which has been the contractor as well for the last several years. Thank you very much, and staff are more than happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Do we have? Okay, I see Director Toth. Go ahead.
Sorry, Chair. I actually had time to prepare before this meeting because the agenda came out a few days earlier. The contract that we're looking to award here, I mean, I appreciate the table that's being presented here as per our updated purchasing policy. It, lowest bid, but they're all sort of within the realm. Anticipating that our landfill is going to be closing in 2025, 2026-ish, is this anticipated to be the last contract for the Seashell landfill? Do we anticipate extending it? I guess that'll leave the question there.
Thank you very much for the question. After this contract, when the landfill is closed, because the term of this contract more or less aligns with the projected lifespan of the Seashell landfill, and it includes, or it could include, any engineering consultant services associated with final closure. Post-closure, there will be continuing requirements for monitoring of the site and addressing of additional issues. So to answer your question, I foresee that there might be a continued need for a limited involvement of contract engineering services associated with this landfill, but it will be way more limited than the current contract involves.
Okay.
Follow up, Chair.
Yes, please go ahead.
Recognizing that that is our, several years away at this point, do we know the lifespan of that continued requirement? I know there's some contemplation about 30 years of monitoring. Is that anticipated to be what we expect for engineering services, or is it like a 5 or 10 year horizon?
100 years. For the next 100 years, we're responsible for the landfill post-closure. So anything that would happen there might not mean that there was always monitoring requirement. That's less than 100 years. But if something arises, we need to have a contractor on standby to address any issues.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see anyone else in the speakers list, so I'm going to ask for a mover for the recommendations on page 6 of our package. I saw Director Beamish, and I have a seconder from Director Toth. Okay, any further discussion on this report or on the... Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Up next, we have Annex C, pages 10 through 12 of our package. And this is for RFP 22161313, Fire Alarm and Linear Heat Detection Installation Award Report for the Seashell Aquatic Facility. And I see our GM of Community Services, Shelley Gagnon, if you'd like to, I'm going to pass it over to you, Shelley, please.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. As approved by the board back in June, administration moved forward in an RFP to install a temporary heat detection system at the Seashell Aquatic Center until the sprinkler system itself is replaced. Unfortunately, no bids were received. However, as supported by applicable trade agreements and our procurement policy, we have begun direct negotiations with Sasco Contractors Limited. The timely installation of this system is very critical, and given that there's not another regularly scheduled board meeting until September, we are coming forward and hoping our negotiations with our vendor are successful. We are requesting that the board authorize awarding the contract to Sasco Contractors Limited up to a maximum of the budget approved of $154,000. And I'm happy to answer questions with that.
Okay. Do I have any questions from directors? Director McMahon, please.
Yes, I thought I'd pop in with a slightly irrelevant question. But since water is the topic of the day, if we continue at stage 4, how does that impact the Seashell Aquatic Facility and the Gibson's Pool?
Thank you, Director McMahon. We actually did not drain the pool at the Seashell Aquatic Center for our shutdown as we had actually originally planned due to the thought that we would be moving into these water restrictions. But we have closed both hot tubs. We've closed the hot tub at the Seashell Aquatic Center, and as we move forward with any further restrictions in other areas, we certainly would look at the closure of hot tubs as they are a big consumer of water. So the good news is we didn't drain the pool, so we don't have to fill it again. And knowing that we're, next year we'll look at potentially draining the pool at the Seashell Aquatic Center, but our shutdown's earlier in the year, so we won't be in these situations. And hopefully that answers your question.
Great. Over to Director Toth next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Recognizing that at a previous meeting, we put forward a motion to invite the District of Seashell, Town of Gibsons, and Seashell Indian Government District to contribute to the costs for this work. I was just looking to see where we're at with that. I know that we haven't seen this request at the District of Seashell yet.
I'm going to turn that over either to our Corporate Services Manager or our CAO.
I'll have to get back to you.
Okay. Director Beamish?
Yeah, I noted in our correspondence, the letter was received, but it was too late to meet our agendas while council was meeting, so it'll be in September.
Okay. So it'll be coming forward to Gibson's in September, and our CAO will follow up and provide an answer on that. Okay. Any other questions on this item? Okay, I'm going to look for a motion from page 10 of the package that in regards to the recommendations there. Do I have Director Toth? I see a move the recommendations on page 10 of Annex C, and I saw a seconder with Director Hiltz. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Next up, we have Annex D, pages 13 through 15 of our package, and this is the RFQ 212-1202 for the self-contained breathing apparatus and fill station award report for Roberts Creek Fire Protection, and I'm assuming that our Manager of Protective Services, Matt Trite, will be speaking to this. Mr.
Yes,
Trite?
thank you, Chair. So the Roberts Creek self-contained breathing apparatus has reached the end of its life cycle and has to be replaced. In addition to that, because the new equipment operates at a higher pressure, we also have to upgrade the fill system to fill those bottles. We went out to RFQ, received 5 bids. The lowest bid was from Electric Gas Monitors, and so they were the successful proponent. In addition, because there was some room left in the budget, there were a couple of additional items purchased. There were voice amplifiers, which allows for better communication between the firefighters wearing the SCBAs. And it also purchase of spectacle kits, which is for those firefighters who need corrective lenses. And because you can't wear regular glasses while wearing a SCBA, there's a special spectacle frame that you can get the lenses put in and insert that into the SCBA to allow firefighters to have proper vision while they're operating with that equipment on.
Okay.
Happy to take any questions.
Perfect. Okay, I've got a little bit of a lineup here. So I've got Director Toth and then Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering if the existing system that's being removed has any use anywhere else, either as an emergency system within the SCRD or as a donation to a fire department, a smaller fire department somewhere else.
It still functions. So I mean, it would still have value. I would have to check with Chief Higgins if there's been any consideration given to its future. He's away up in the interior right now, but certainly it still has value because it does still work. Just that the pressure doesn't meet our needs. So we'll have to address that in the future.
Okay. Director Ties.
Yeah, I'm happy to move recommendations on page 13 as listed.
Okay. And do I see a seconder for that? I also have speakers list still continuing. So Director Lee and then Director Toth.
Yes, I was just noticing that this is different than what we've got in the other fire halls. Does this mean that the other fire halls will be upgrading real soon, or would that be a requirement?
As far as the breathing apparatus themselves, it would depend on the life or the age of those breathing apparatus. All of the equipment is interchangeable between the fire departments for their mutual aid agreements. What happened was that traditionally SCBAs operated about 2200 PSI. So you had about 20 minutes of breathing air in a bottle, and an alarm would go off with a quarter of that left. So about 5 minutes left, and the firefighter would then vacate a building. The new standard now is that the alarm is supposed to go off with 1/3 of the air left. So it gives less time for the firefighter to operate in the building. And in addition now, the standard of practice has changed that the firefighters should not wait until that alarm goes off before they exit the building. And so that air past the alarm is supposed to be just for emergencies. And so that greatly reduces the working time of a traditional 2200 PSI SCBA. These ones are double that, which is the way that most fire departments are going now, to allow the firefighters enough time to get inside of a structure and be effective in that hazardous environment before having to leave.
Okay. Next up, Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. This report, excuse me, we amended our purchasing policy recently to list all of the qualified bidders. I note that this report doesn't list all the qualified bidders. However, I do note that the RFQ ended in June. So I'm just wondering if the timing of that RFQ closing had anything to do with that omission, or if it was just missed.
My guess is because of the time, we still had some that were outstanding, so I think your comment is, I would have to go to staff for sure, but I know at the time when we asked for the change to happen, that we were also informed that there would probably be a little bit of a transition period while we were waiting, because there were still some outstanding that may not have hit that, but I'll go to staff for clarity on that.
That would be my understanding. I'd have to take a look at the specific dates to see if there was a chance it was missed, but we knew when that direction was provided to staff that there were some things in the hopper that weren't going to be included, but we would be making sure that the information was included with the ones submitted after the direction was provided.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, so I am going to call the question on the recommendations on page 13 of our package in Annex D. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. So that puts us to the end of our reports. We are, being that this is a special board meeting, we are going to skip the director's reports at this time. We have no communications, motions, bylaws, or new business. We will be going in camera. So the process going forward, because I know we have some questions from our audience, our electronic audience, as well as our in-house audience. What we're going to do is we're going to make the motion to go in camera, and then we will take our questions from our public. So I'm going to ask for a motion that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with Section 91 G, I, and K of the Community Charter. If I can have that moved, please. Moved Director Ties, seconded Director Beamish. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. So we do have a series of questions that have come in. I'm going to go to, we have an in-person audience member first, and we'll go to that person first. If you'd like to come to the mic, and there is an on button there, and then that way the members that are outside the boardroom can hear you as well. And if you'd like to just identify yourself and go ahead and ask your question. Perfect.
Roger Edmonds, Roseman Road, Gibsons.
Okay.
My question is, we already have the water in the system, but we have huge leaks all over the place. Mm-hmm. Why can't something be done about that? I'm told that nothing can be done about it, except maybe fines. Now, whether we have to change the laws or what, we should be able to fix those water leaks. If not, can the people be asked to shut the water off when they leave, or any amount of water that can be saved is all good. That's pretty well the basic of it.
Okay, so the leaks within the system. So I'm going to go, GM Rosenboom, if you can comment on what the process is for leaks and how leaks are first off detected, as well as how they're dealt with at a staffing level. And thank you, Roger, very much for that.
Thank you for the question. Leaks on private properties are outside of our jurisdiction to address. We cannot go on somebody's private property and start digging up their driveways to find out where their leaks are. That's called trespassing. So the only thing we can do is we can identify it with meters or other means. We can identify the leak and help the resident to identify where the leaks are and help them to and urge them to resolve it as soon as possible. That's why we have the provisions in the bylaw to shut off somebody's water service if the person is not responsive. And that's so because that's within our jurisdiction to do, because we can do that from our water main. We don't have to enter the property. We cannot enter a property to identify a leak, to resolve leak. That's fully within the jurisdiction of the residence itself. It's outside of ours. So yes, there are leaks. We are identifying them within our own system. We are identifying them and resolve them in our own system. And we notify residents and we urge them to resolve them as soon as possible. But ultimately, it's their responsibility and to make sure that the water line is not leaking. And the bylaw allows us to use the shut-off provisions if no response is provided. And that's the process we're following now. And to date, usually informing people that their notice that their service connection will be shut off is sufficient to get it actually addressed. Usually we give them a couple of days notice. But in other cases, we shut it off until the leak is resolved.
And Roger, I do know of a resident in the Pender Harbor area that had their water shut off. I know that anecdotally, so I do know that it is happening. Treated water into the ground is an issue, but we're looking after it as much as we can.
It's a big issue.
It is, yeah.
And it should be addressed.
Yep.
No matter how you do it, it should be addressed.
Yep. Yep. Thank you. Up next, we have a couple of attendees in our electronic audience. So I'm going to go first to Mary Catherine. I'll ask IT to allow Mary to speak, and we will bring her in. Mary Catherine, if you could unmute yourself and go ahead with your question, please. And please identify yourself.
Yes, hello, thank you. My name is Mary Catherine Anderson. I'm a registered farmer, actually, on Pratt Road in Elphinstone. Thank you for having such a comprehensive meeting today about water. I was curious, Mr. Rosenboom, if there was a breakdown on the 13,500 cubic meters between residential and non-residential usage. And secondly, regarding leaks, wow, it's really interesting to know that the RD will help identify and locate. I have to say, I really feel it's one of the big barriers that people face in resolving their leaks is cost and a fear of cost. What are they going to have to dig up? And related to that is we're experiencing an enormous labor shortage, especially within the construction realms on the coast. So even if a property is able to identify and realizes that something has to be excavated and repaired, the timeline for being able to contract labor is months, if not year, at this point on the coast. So perhaps if the RD, the staffing, if there's a way to form partnerships with properties who have leaks to not only help identify and locate, but remediate in some capacity, it would go a long way in expediting the lost water through that process. And thirdly, thank you for the time. Regarding Director Beamish's comment about outdoor grow-ops, I can really let you know that outdoor grow-ops do not exist on the coast. It's not in their financial interest. Marijuana plant is dioecious, female and male. The marijuana bud comes from the female plant. So if a male plant is around, it causes all the female plants to go to seed, which ruins a marijuana farmer harvest. So due to that financial risk and the fact that they can't isolate themselves sufficiently on the coast, no one would dare grow for profit outside. And this is also related to what drives residential water usage so high. There are numerous indoor grow-ops, legal or not legal, on the coast going through residential processes. Likewise, tourism, meaning B&Bs, and all of this is coming under the residential quadrant. If there's a way that, in the old days, I used to use the hydrometer to check for electricity spikes to identify grow-ups. So I don't know if something similar can be done, but I really think to focus in on that residential high use, you might find out that it is coming a lot from B&Bs, tourism, and indoor grow-ops. So I really thank you for, maybe you could address the breakdown of the 13,500 cubic meters and the cost barrier and labor shortage for leaks. And regarding tomorrow's emergency meeting, would it be open to the public? Thank you.
Okay, yes, Mary Catherine, number one, the meeting tomorrow is open to the public. It will be available online through the same way you watched today, so you'll be able to see it then.
Thank you.
Or yes, through the same way you'll be able to view, and it's very public. I'll go over to GM Rosenboom regarding the residential versus non-residential use of the 13.5. Go ahead.
Thank you for the question. The 13,500 cubic meters is the amount of water we're treating on a daily basis. So the only way for us to identify if it's residential, if the water is actually used residential or not, is through our metering reads, and we're doing them once a month at the moment, towards the end of the month. And given that not all properties on the coast are currently metered, we will never be able to provide a good overview of the residential use. However, we can do an estimate because we know what commercial use is, and the total use minus commercial use is most likely residential use. So indirect, on a monthly basis, we can identify that, but I don't have those data with me at the moment. Thank you.
You have what the commercial usage is?
Yeah.
What is it?
Oh, no, I don't have it here, but we could calculate it for our July data.
Thank you.
And that would include commercial, institutional, and institutional use.
Okay, and then Mary Catherine, you had also had some questions regarding
Leaks. But there's a huge cost and labor barrier to fixing leaks. I mean, like a person gets a letter, it's identified, and then what? The onus of responsibility is on the property owner, but if there is a prohibitive cost barrier and a labor shortage, is there anything that the RD can do to help remediate? Can RD provide its staff, perhaps, to actually go in and remediate? Can there be like a partnership, a willing partnership? The leaks obviously are such an important issue. And if people, cutting off people's water, like what if it's the leaks or people are in a financial situation where they're not able to undertake the cost of repair and then their water shut off on top? It just sounds like it's a no-win where if the RD has resources or can put resources, given this exceptional emergency situation, to actually helping repair the leak, it might go a long way.
Okay.
And reduce people's fear.
Okay, and we hear the concern and the question, and at the end of the day, it's not it's not within the work plan right now and the staffing level in order to remediate actual leaks within individual properties. That's certainly something that we can discuss for future, but it would increase it would mean an increase in staffing on our side as well in order to because that becomes significant on our end, and it's also a risk on private property. But it's something that we could certainly discuss going forward. It's not going to be something that happens immediately, as you've heard, that our staff capacity is quite thin right now, especially with the other projects that are going on. But the note is taken. I've also, Director Toth, did you want to respond to this as well?
I did, Chair. I grew up single-parent household. We grew up on disability. I know that there used to be grant assistance programs from the province to help with emergency repairs to a house. This conversation has sort of tweaked me for that. I've taken a few notes. I'm actually going to directly follow up with our MLA, who also happens to be the Minister for Poverty Reduction. So I'll follow up with him. I'll try and follow up with him today and see if any of those programs still exist, or if there's any conversation about further programs that may be coming down the pipeline.
Thank you. And also, just to reiterate, it's not just the RD with a staffing shortage. It's a coastal issue. So, to get an excavator or a plumber in, good luck. So, we're in a tight spot on a lot of sides here. So your appreciation, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And thank you, Mary Catherine. We certainly understand that there is an enormous labor shortage on the coast right now, and we hear you. We hear you there. I'm going to go to the next on our list, which is Michael Kraus, IT. If you could move Michael into the gallery, please. Michael, you are within. If you'd like to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question, please.
I'm unmuted. Thank you very much. First of all, I wanted to express my sincere gratitude to your dedication to the community and your wisdom, your knowledge, and whatever you bring forward in this time of water uncertainty. It's not really a question, it's more of a comment, and I think what we really need to look at is our relationship with water. We see water as a commodity that we use to water our gardens and shower. But I think we need to really start to understand what water really is. And I was fortunate enough for the last year and a half to interview some of the most renowned scientists and visionaries and solutionaries around water. And what we really need to do is we need to come together as a community to actually see what water really is. We are 99.9% water on a molecular level ourselves. And all of life is connected to water. And so once we start to understand the properties, the intelligence, the consciousness of water, then the solution is going to come from our inside. And so then we're going to start preserving water in the times where water is abundant throughout the winter. We're going to be able to potentially build rainwater harvesting systems to prepare for the future, because that's my personal opinion, I think this current environmental crisis is just the beginning of what is yet to come. So what we need to do is we need to organize the community on a community level through citizens to really start an educational process, first of all, and then find solutions within micro communities, how we can support each other to build a resilient network of water reservoirs for the future, to preserve the water in wintertime, to start collecting water in spring that is going to get us through summer to a certain degree, because every drop of water that we can conserve throughout that period where water is abundant, we're going to have available in the summertime at our disposal. And so I'm currently working on a project that I would like to propose to the board within the next couple of weeks. To actually, it's a network, a framework to really create that solution long term. And I think the solution long term really needs to come from the inside, from our relationship to water and how we treat water and how we are taking it. Right now, we're taking it well, right now we're not taking it for granted anymore because we're in a crisis. But 8 months out of the year, we're taking it for granted. And once we start to really be able to see what water really is, I think we're going to be able to have an opportunity to come together as a community and maybe even be an example for the rest of the world to say, this is what we can do. This is how we can rally around water. Thank you so much for letting me speak.
Thank you, Michael, and we look forward to your delegation request. And if you need any, the information on becoming a delegation or presenting to the board is, there's a form on our website that you can fill out, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, I have no other questions on here. So I am going to ask IT to lock out our webinar. I'll ask Mary Catherine and Michael if you can depart, and we are just going to take a couple of moments, about 3 minutes, to just get set up and go into our in-camera board meeting. So we'll just give everybody a chance here to get set up to close our meeting. Thank you, everyone. And welcome back to your special board meeting of August 16th, 2021. And if you're still with us, thank you very much for continuing to be with us. And you're just in time for us to adjourn. So may I have a motion to adjourn, please? So moved Director Toth, seconded Director Ties. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. And we will see you tomorrow for our August 17th emergency board meeting at 2 p.m. Thank you and have a great day. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Safe travels. Bye-bye. Okay.